to Regarding Men, yet another episode. I'm Tom Golden, and I'm here with Paul Elam and Janice Fiamengo, two of my most favorite men's advocates. And today we're going to talk about a contrast. We're going to talk about a tale of two, and I don't know what you would call them, because we tend to watch videos and we tend to say, well, let's do this video, let's do that video. But we ran into these two videos, and we wanted to talk about both of them because there's such a contrast between truth and untruth, between what's lauded and what's thrown out, between
I think somebody's tea is ready.
Get the teapot, please. Oh, well, that's not tea, that's just pot, but that's another story all in itself. Anyway, these two videos are so much of a contrast, we couldn't help but want to show you both of them. No. Because it's just, one will make you laugh, and when you hear the story of the other one, it'll make you cry. Anyway, the two are Sheila Jeffreys, who's a rad femme from way back, apparently, and fairly well known, and she's talking about feminism, but we'll get into it in just a minute. The other is a fellow named Will Knowland, who is a professor / instructor at Eton, which is a very posh school in Great Britain. And he did this thing on patriarchy, a little video on patriarchy, and he got fired for it. The other video is a feminist who didn't get fired for it. She got applauded for it. So let's look at the two and see where we go. Should we start with our feminist friend first?
Yeah, let's do it. Sheila Jeffreys.
And we can start and stop this one as we go. So let's see what she has to say.
Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is the importance of including drag in our understanding of the problem of men's cross-dressing behavior. Okay, now this is just a sort of representative drag queen. He happens to be a very, very famous American drag queen. The important thing is not what he looks like, which is very ordinary for drag queens, except it's a bit posh. He's a sort of upmarket drag queen. But the important thing is his name. His name is Alaska Thunderfuck. Now, the names are very important, and I'm going to talk about names later on. But let's just think about what it means at this.
Stop it right there.
Alaska Thunderfuck.
Yes, names are very important. Now, if anybody wants to watch this entire video, which we all did, so that you don't have to, it's only 24 minutes long, I think, and it's
a long 24 minutes.
It is a long 24 minutes.
Excruciating minutes.
24 gobsmacking minutes of denial of reality. But the primary focus is on what she refers to as transvestites and drag queens, both of which she claims are all about hating women. Right. The worldview of Jeffreys is that everything in society, whatever it happens to be, demonstrates male hatred of women. So, and her take on transvestites, which I'm not quite sure how she distinguishes between, or whether she makes much of a distinction, if anything, between transvestites and transgendered persons, people who wish to be the opposite sex, who are born believing, or at least say from a very early age, they believed that they were in the wrong sexed body and wish to be the other sex, and then do go on to present themselves at that other sex. Even those people, she seems to be claiming, well, at least particularly male to female transgendered people, she sees those as men who hate women.
Yes.
It's a very, very strange kind of argument to make. But I mean, if you understand anything about Sheila Jeffreys, you know that that's her take on the whole world. Everything in the world is about hatred of women. In this case, I was very interested to know why she thinks the name, what is it again? Something
Alaska Thunderfuck.
Oh yes, Alaska.
Great name.
I know where this name comes from.
Really?
It's actually a strain of cannabis that's grown in the Matanuska Valley. So whatever that Jeffreys read into this name, it's just a reference to pot.
Oh God, that's even more funny.
That's all it is. Yes, there's a strain that came out of the Matanuska Valley. It used to be called Matanuska Thunderfuck, and in later years just became known generically as Alaska Thunderfuck. Not that I know any of this from personal experience much.
That's hilarious. Oh God, that's hilarious. And one of the things that I love about this woman is she has zero sense of humor. I mean, zero. I don't think I've ever seen anyone with less sense of humor than her. So this haughtiness about her too. Oh, should we go on and see what she has to say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's see what she has
Hold
to
on to
say.
your hats, folks.
And dressed up
Yes,
like them.
please.
This is calling himself Alaska Thunderfuck. Okay, we can take him off the screen now because I don't think we want to look at him. Thank you. Now, so
She laughed.
the imitation
Yeah, like we want to look at
of
her.
members of an oppressed class of persons, that is women, by members of the oppressor class, men, whether for sexual excitement or entertainment, is harmful and it's insulting to us. The campaign for gender identity rights by heterosexual men, transvestites, violates women's human rights by gaining access for men to all women's spaces and opportunities and erasing women. Drag is different in its effects. It is also based upon imitating women, in this case, ridiculing women for entertainment, and is being normalized in a way which makes this form of woman-hating central to male-stream culture.
Okay, let's stop right there.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, talk about gobsmack. I think one of the things you got to consider about Jeffreys is that her whole theories, her whole philosophy in approaching and understanding gender roles is that classic traditional femininity, makeup, shoes, stuff like this, all of these things that are normally considered the trappings of femininity are actual sacrifices and self-abuse that women put themselves through in order to submit to patriarchy. That's her whole theory, that all this stuff and it's why you see her. I mean, she's a woman who dresses intentionally to look male, complaining about males and dressing intentionally look female. I mean, the irony is not lost on me with this. But her willingness to interpret anything as misogyny.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
like she could go down the aisle of a grocery store and pick up a can of beans and say, this can of beans is misogynistic.
That's
It
right.
hates women. This is mind-boggling stuff.
Yes, it is. She is mind-boggling. Should we go ahead?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Hold on.
It is a propaganda of woman-hating. Both drag and transvestism, which is the cross-dressing of heterosexual men for sexual excitement, are products of the oppression of women. They utilize the hierarchy of gender, in which what is called femininity represents the behavior of subordinates. The gender, in inverted commas, assigned to the dominant caste of men is called masculinity, and it's typified by behaviors which signify power, such as the right to wear comfortable clothing that conceals the body, to spread legs and take up space. The gender, assigned to the subordinate caste of women, is called femininity, and it's typified by behaviors which signify subordinate status, such as being required to show the body and please the dominant caste sexually, to wear fetishes that men find pleasing, keep legs together and not take up space.
Let's stop there for a sec.
Yes.
Whoa, I mean, this is, I think this is a really interesting little bit of her talk because it pretty much sums up the radical feminist position to a T. She is absolutely in denial that there is such a thing as biological sex at all.
Right.
Even while she fiercely defends the biological sex that is called woman
Yes.
from incursions by men.
Exactly.
And her entire shtick is that everything that is woman is socially constructed through domination and subjugation.
Right.
Every single feature of femininity is merely a mark of women's oppression. It's a completely paranoid, bizarre theory, and it doesn't even have anything to do with reality, in that she begins her definition of what is, assigned as feminine and what is assigned as masculine by saying that the dominant class, masculine persons, are defined by the ability to wear comfortable clothes and to sit with their legs apart. Those were two out of maybe a very few other characteristics that she defined, whereas femininity is defined by the inability to wear comfortable clothes, the mandate to uncover the body, to reveal the body, and the mandate to sit with legs closed together. These are supposedly the prerequisites to be masculine or feminine. And this now is why we have all these campaigns that we've seen for years in subways, for instance, in which feminists go around shaming men who sit with their legs apart, which is supposedly not only something that takes up space in the way that men do, but that is supposedly an expression of dominating masculinity. I mean, this is so crazy. This is the statement of a woman who has worked as an academic, an extremely high-paid elite position at the University of Melbourne for decades, where she wore the most. She merely has to look around and see that there are no women being forced to wear anything that they might not want to wear. Women wear extremely comfortable clothes. I mean, I was thinking about this: women lawyers, women teachers, women journalists. What forcing? You don't see women having to wear high heels in any of these professions. I think it was once the case that, or a tie. That's it. I mean, she obviously is so lacking in empathy or awareness for men that she doesn't even see that, yes, being forced to wear a tie every day of your working life for decades, which many, many men who work in offices and businesses are forced to do. There is nothing equivalent for women. There are no professions. I was going to say, I think maybe once women airline hostesses were forced to wear, some makeup perhaps, and perhaps moderately high-heeled shoes, but that is a thing of the past. There is no profession outside of maybe pole dancing and things like that, where there's that kind of thing. Yes, indeed. But that is a tiny, tiny minority of women who go into those kinds of jobs. So this is ludicrous. The entire basis of her thesis
is crazy.
Yeah, no, not only are women much more free than men to have a wide variety of different styles of attire. I mean, the ranges for women, we wouldn't dare consider speaking to a woman in the workplace and saying you shouldn't wear this or that. But we certainly would with men. But what also strikes me about just the pure aggressive ignorance in her position is that these modes of dress for women bring them power. Mm-hmm. And she totally ignores the awesome power that femininity has in all environments, in the workplace, in the family, in social settings, no matter where you are. Women who dress in a feminine way command sexual attention, and that is a true form of power that men can't compete with. And we see this reflected in women's ability socially to point a finger at a man and automatically, in most cases, be believed and have people willing to commit proxy violence on their behalf.
So true.
She totally is just
true.
As though her head is in this total complete sand
on
all of this true female power that she's denying.
And it's a power so vast, and men can't even conceive of it. I've tried to conceive what it would be like to live in a body where people wanted to see me, wanted to have me, wanted me, you know, not because I did anything, but just because I had it. It's like, that's hard for me to really understand, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, should we forge ahead?
Yeah, let's go ahead and see what
I
else
think
she
it
says
should be
about this.
Should be what?
It should be added to this too, that I think, anyway, it's not coincidental that the female feminists who are railing the most about this alleged male beauty standard are the ones who don't meet it in any way, form, or fashion.
Yes.
And again, that
She's a
may
good
even
example.
sound, but I think there's a lot of truth to that. I don't think Andrea Dworkin's appearance was just coincidental.
Right. You don't hear Kate Upton talking about this kind of thing, eh?
No, you don't.
Probably not. Well, back to Sheila. Here we go.
There is often confusion about this. We're encouraged to believe that masculinity and femininity are natural and will always exist, at least in some form, and that all we need to do is loosen up the constraints of gender so that men can wear high heels, for instance. But these behaviors of domination and subordination will only exist so long as women's oppression continues. When women's oppression ends, many behaviors that are not related to domination and submission will be performed by anyone regardless of sex. But certain behaviors that signify women's subordination will cease to exist, such as crippling and humiliating clothing. The imitation of women in drag and transvestism consists of the performance of the behaviors which these men consider to represent women's subordination and inferiority. That's what makes them masochistically sexually exciting or entertaining.
Okay. You know,
Yeah.
that really got me. The idea that, you know, she sees this hatred in this portrayal of this guy dressing up like a woman. I mean, she can't even see a shred of humor in that. And he calls himself Alaska Thunderfuck. I mean, that's hilarious. It's fucking hilarious. And she can't see one shred of the humor in it. No. It's got to be about something else. Oh, you know, it's the oppression of women. He's making fun of them. He's not making fun of them. He's making fun of himself. He's people are laughing because he's dressing up like a woman. You know, it's like, that's what's funny, at least to me.
And it is entertaining.
It is. It certainly is. And he's also kind of saying, look at what women have that we don't have. Mm-hmm. People can ooh and ah over their bodies, and no man can stand up and have that happen. But if I dress up like one, maybe I'll get some of that. You know? I mean, that's what he's saying, at least to me.
Yeah.
It's not about hating them. It's about admiring them, really.
Well, I know the idea that there is hatred in this, you know, even to the extent of those men who actually want to be women. That is what they want. They want to be accepted as women. Those who are not, you know, aggressive activists don't want to make a big deal out of it. They simply want to be able to go about their lives as women. And she sees that as an expression of hatred. Yes. It's, I mean, it's crazy. As for drag, I have to confess, I suspect that drag is very complex, and the fact that, like, the attraction of it, the fact that all she can get out of it is that these are expressions of mockery and hatred. She, at a later point in the video, actually compares the performance of blackface to the performance of what she calls woman face. Right. And she makes the case that it should be treated in exactly the same way, and should be, you know, if not outlawed, at least frowned upon by all, you know, facets of society, and seen as rooted in hatred and discrimination. You know, her thinking is so incredibly simplistic that you can't get a better illustration, really, of the ideological blinders of radical feminist misandry. Right. But yeah, and you know, and this notion that women are forced to perform all these markers of their subordination, it's just crazy. You know, she talks about the revealing of the body as a marker of subordination. But then later on, she also talks about the covering up of the body as a marker of subordination. Yep. You can't, it's one of these unfalsifiable theories in which every single thing can be alleged to be a marker of subordination. It can never be proved to be so. And it doesn't exist. There are no workplaces where women are forced to wear makeup. Women willingly wear makeup. Most men are not even that interested in makeup. I've never had a boyfriend who said, gee, Janice, you should really wear a bit more makeup. In fact, my husband would prefer that I never wear any when I put on my lipstick, which I like because I think it makes me look better. He says, you've got too much lipstick on again. This is
misogynist.
Like these things are complicated, and they have to do with women's willing participation in gender norms for various deep-seated, evolutionary biological reasons. And the fact that she can't even begin to comprehend or recognize these illustrates an alarming narrow-mindedness. And to think that this person was a professor of political studies. My God, what a waste of a taxpayer-funded position.
It's really interesting too. Again, her worldview is that women eroticize their own oppression, and through all these, what she's alleging are really, truly involuntary participation in a multi-billion-dollar makeup industry and fashion industry and cosmetic surgery and all the links that women go to, because it does bring them power in their lives. Yep. But what's really fascinating to me is I have to consider what would be the motivation. You got to wonder what motivates Sheila Jeffreys to even have this worldview, to practice this level of ignorance where everything is woman hating, no matter, whether clothed, unclothed, no matter what. And it reeks to me of personal jealousy. And you see this, I think, a lot in male feminists. They're longing for women, for approval, for connection to women, gets acted out politically in a form of gender politics. And I think you see the same thing here. She is a lesbian feminist. She's attracted to women. And she sees a whole world of women working to make themselves attractive to men. And I think it bothers her. I don't think it's any more complicated than that.
Yeah, I was thinking family of origin. Who knows what happened to her?
Probably that mixed in. I mean, I'm sure there's a cauldron of stuff going into making this particular witch, but part of it to me would be that the desire for sexual control over women. Yeah. And it gets expressed as misogyny. She's the misogynistic one in this thing. Women doing what they want to do, which is to acquire sexual power, bothers her. Yeah. And she attacks them for it and attacks femininity for it. I don't think you have to look too hard.
No, I think you're probably right. See what's going on. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the bad news. So we've gotten through the bad news first. Janice, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to finish that by saying, and with this, I mean, this is a warped worldview. This is a worldview. She's written books in which she claims that everything about heterosexual femininity is a social construct, and it's all about women accepting their subordination and trying to imagine that there's something good in their subordination. And she has actually called for all women to reject sexuality with men. She's a self-declared lesbian feminist in the sense that she says any woman who cares about other women must devote herself to women and must reject men, must refuse to be sexually involved with any man. Now that is a very deeply, deeply hateful worldview. And all of her stuff now about, the trans agenda and drag and everything. I mean, she's dealing with homosexual men mostly who do drag anyway. And that doesn't quite fit into her schema, but it doesn't stop her. And she's now being accused of transphobia and everything else. But all of that is just really rooted in her deep hatred for men. And yet that has been allowed to counsel hundreds of impressionable female students, as well as male students, of course, but to counsel hundreds of female students and to tell them that their natural desire for men is totally a construct of their own oppression and should be rejected. She is likely responsible for the misery of hundreds of women who have tried to follow her prescriptions, and she's been allowed to preach that, not just from her personal position at home in front of a video camera, which I'm perfectly fine with, but from a university-funded position at the University of Melbourne, where she taught for decades. It's amazing to me that a petition was never got up, and I suspect it never was, to have her fired from that position, or at least prevented from preaching such hateful and deeply damaging doctrines. And yet I bet nobody ever said boo about it.
Correct. In contrast to the gentleman we're about to talk about,
Yeah.
who did one little video, which was never even published for the school, and they fired him. So let's have a look at this guy's video. We'll start with the beginning. Here we go.
Yeah.
Patriarchy is a theory that says the differences between the sexes and their social roles are not the result of biology. Instead, they are socially constructed, and they have resulted in the pervasiveness of male domination in women's lives. This idea of male domination has led the Good Lads initiative to claim that traditional ideas of masculinity need to be reimagined, but it has also led, according to Doris Lessing, the novelist and feminist icon, to an unthinking and automatic rubbishing of men, which is now so part of our culture that it is hardly even noticed.
Hardly
Boom.
even noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anybody see anything hateful in that little presentation there?
Not at
Not
all.
really.
No,
Not at
nothing.
all.
It's all
Not at all. I mean, this is not a men's rights presentation.
No.
He never once quotes from a men's rights advocate. He doesn't talk about rights at all. This is a pro-traditional masculinity kind of presentation. It's obviously designed at some level just to counter the Sheila Jeffreys of the world. He's a teacher of boys, of adolescent boys, and at an elite public school in the UK. And he's simply saying that all of the reliable scientific evidence, all of what anthropologists and competent sociologists and evolutionary biologists would have to tell us shows that there is such a thing as masculinity, that it's biologically rooted, and that it plays an extremely positive role in the world for everybody, but especially for women. That's all he's saying. And for that, this man has been fired. He is right now facing the prospect of homelessness for himself, his wife, and his 5 children.
Yep. Crazy, crazy, crazy.
Absolutely outrageous.
Yep. Should we go ahead and hear the next one?
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right. See what he says.
People are watching surprisingly traditional masculine archetypes. Nobody wants to watch films about characters like this. And one of the best established findings of modern psychology is that greater gender equality in a society leads to greater gravitation towards traditional gender norms. In the literature on this topic, sex is the biological distinction between male and female, whereas gender is how the difference between male and female is shaped by culture. So, researchers have termed this result the patriarchy paradox. Shaping men and women culturally to be more similar actually exaggerates their differences. It is the opposite of what the social constructivist theory predicted. But it isn't paradoxical if patriarchy is, rather than being merely socially constructed, partly based in biology. Contrary to the claim that patriarchy is about male domination of women, it also at least partly results from women's choices because it benefits them.
Indeed. Well said.
There it
Right?
is.
God.
Yeah.
I
Very-
can't believe he actually said that. No wonder he got fired.
He's telling the truth. And that
Yeah.
really gets them. That whole thing about, these cultures that have been trying to socially construct gender, they end up having the men be the firemen and the women be the nurses. I mean, it's like it completely turns on its head their ideas, and that really gets them. The
Yeah, I
Division
mean, that was
51 types.
that was a point that got Jordan Peterson in so much trouble too a few years ago, when he first started attacking the feminist orthodoxy by saying, look, if you look at all of these places like Sweden and Norway that have taken more measures than any other society in history to give women the opportunity to choose whatever they want to do with their lives, that have taken all sorts of state mandated measures to equalize the lot of men and women, you don't find that women are choosing male, typically masculine kinds of professions. You see greater gender diversity between men and women. And that's pretty much inarguable. And yet that made people furious. And this is the same point that he's making. And also, the typical point that women choose this. When you give women the choice, women choose to be protected by men. And a society in which men protect women is obviously to women's advantage. And it's utter nonsense to pretend that it isn't.
Yes. And in fact, I think that's the next little clip we're going to play. That's exactly what he talks about. But so far, all I hear from this man is truth. He's talking about research. He's talking about what is. And let's see what he says the next time here.
In a cross-cultural study of manhood, David Gilmour, professor of anthropology, concluded that 3 moral injunctions seem to come repeatedly into focus. One must impregnate women, protect dependents from danger, and provision kith and kin. None of these 3 roles, procreate, protect, provide, is exclusively masculine, but the protector role is the least shared, making it the core of masculinity. It is the least shared because it is the one most firmly rooted in anatomy and physiology.
Right.
Even in lion prides, this is very clear. Although lionesses do 90% of the providing, the males are responsible for protecting the pride. They only help kill the largest, most dangerous prey that would otherwise cost the lives of too many lionesses.
There it is. There's the grim reality of patriarchal privilege and oppression of women.
Yeah.
And of course, he goes on to talk about all of this, the fact that women are never forced to go to war.
Right.
That women refuse to do so. Women refuse the role of protector over and over again, and they're never forced into it. And men are not naturally necessarily inclined to embrace the possibility of their own death, but they know that that's what's required of them, and they accept it. And if we take that away and we pretend that somehow women would be better off without men, we are simply fooling ourselves, because the world would be immeasurably, he goes on, I don't know if we even have time to play all those now, because I know that Paul has to get going, but he talks about the way in which the world would be immeasurably worse for women if men disappeared, or if the masculine role disappeared from society.
It would become a treacherous place for women. Every moment of their lives would be fraught with danger, were it not for the protective instinct and behavior of men. That's just something the biological denial of people like Jeffreys, and the distorting of it. I mean, for instance, she keeps alluding to this male beauty standard. I got news for her. There is a human beauty standard. There are things like hip to waist ratios in women that trigger attraction. It is human to be this way. There's facial features, eyes that are symmetrical with each other, and facial structures that draw human beings to each other. So you can take this up with God or Darwin. But your problem is with the human species. And the human species is not what Sheila Jeffreys wants it to be.
Right.
And of course, she gets lauded for attacking half of the human species. And this guy says a handful of words, just sort of questioning orthodoxy and his career ends, and he can no longer take care of his family.
Yeah.
They've taken the very thing he's mandated to do.
But he's questioning it with the truth. I mean, not something that can be disproven. The guy's talking about the truth, what's literally been shown by research, and they're turning it around and firing him. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane.
And I mean, he did, he wasn't able, I encourage, of course, everybody to watch the full video. I think it's 32, 33 minutes, something like that. We'll have a link in the low bar.
Yes.
This was a video lecture that he made for his students at upper level male students. He said himself that he wanted to bring more balance to the discussion of the male-female issue. He felt that radical feminism had far too much of a lockstep hold on what everybody was teaching. And so he created this. Somebody complained. We'll include an article about the whole story. Somebody complained, not one of the male students, an administrator or a staff worker or something. And the headmaster told him that he would have to get rid of this lecture. He did so. It was never shown to the students, but he did put it up on his personal YouTube channel. Up until a few days ago, it had a couple hundred views. It's now got, I don't know, over 30,000 because of all the attention, of course, that he's receiving. And, there's nothing in it. He's got all the links to all of the reputable scholars that he's drawing on. There's nothing in it that is fantastical. There's certainly nothing in it that is hateful in any way. And we've got Sheila Jeffreys on the one hand saying that women grow their hair long because they're forced to do so by this, horrifically limiting and soul-destroying standard of feminine beauty. And men like long hair, and guess why?
Because it makes it easier to grab them and
Exactly.
drag them around.
Yeah,
And
drag
she
them
had
into
to
the
do
cave.
that with
And
her
you get an
face.
orgasm from just touching it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Men orgasm. Yeah, men orgasm
She
from just
said that.
touching hair. Yeah. Everything comes down to a horrifically predatory male sexuality. That's the other thing that I wanted to mention too. I mean, just beside our purposes, but her whole take on transgenderism is that these are men who get off on dressing in women's clothing. She sees it entirely through sexual terms. Absolutely no empathy for the many, many transgendered women who claim that they have done this because they wanted to be women and believed they were women.
Yes.
And she just to think that a professor of political studies can get away with saying that men like long hair because it means that women can't get away. They can grab their hair and can put that forward as a serious academic theory explaining the world and be paid a six-figure salary for preaching that to vulnerable young people. It's incredible. And this guy tries to write the record with a measured, scientifically based, humanistic portrayal of why men and women have developed the way they have over eons. And he's fired for it. It's
Indeed.
incredible.
Insane.
Yeah, it's like Jeffries saw one of the old cartoons of a caveman with a club and the woman by the hair grabbing her in the cave. And she said, "Oh, there's my model. I'll build
That's
it for
right.
her."
That's where everything came from.
Yeah.
The cave. Ready for the next one?
That's just, okay, maybe this should be our last because I know
We've
all
got
has to go.
two more. We'll get at least one in. We'll see
Okay.
what he says.
War has usually been men's work because men, as a result of natural sex differences that aren't socially constructed, are physically adapted to fighting. Recognising that gender roles will be less fluid if sex differences are natural, some feminist theorists, such as Judith Butler, have argued that not only gender but sex itself is socially constructed, claiming that intersex people, or people with only an X chromosome or XXY chromosomes, show sex isn't binary or natural. The biologist Emma Hilton, however, has described the idea that sex is a social construct as false at every conceivable scale of resolution. Sex isn't defined by chromosomes. In all species, even those with different or no chromosomes, females produce large gametes, reproductive cells, and males produce small ones. there is no third intermediate gamete side.
Yeah, there is no third intermediate gamete.
Yeah. And as I think he goes on to point out that, this is the case in all living creatures.
Yes,
It has,
yes.
even if there were no human beings, it would be the case. There is nothing socially constructed about it.
Exactly.
I mean, it is astounding that we have got to the point in our culture where people teach fantasy that is in direct denial of biological reality. People are able to teach fantasy as if it were true and get away with it, while someone trying to say reality is fired. I mean, we are a society in deep, deep trouble if we don't turn this around. And I don't see us turning it around, unfortunately, but it's amazing. At least this man is getting a lot of support. There's now a petition with hundreds and hundreds of signatures by the boys at his school and perhaps others, a beautifully written, cogent argument about why he is such a good teacher and why his dismissal would spell really the end of everything that Eton, which is supposed to be the best school preparing boys to go on to university. It's a school that was attended by Winston Churchill, by Boris Johnson himself, by Douglas Murray, by all sorts of luminaries. Why, if this is allowed to stand, this is essentially the end of what Eton has traditionally existed for, which is to prepare young men to become leaders of society.
Yeah. Great summation.
It is.
Great
indeed.
Summation.
And it is just sad. It's really disheartening. Not just this guy's career, but the way that the establishment is now so easily tossing out the education of young people and replacing it with indoctrination. It's
crazy.
It's very depressing. And I agree with Janice. I don't see it getting back to normal. I don't see it happening without some sort of crisis.
And I always agree with Janice.
Yes.
No matter what. Except for one thing. Men
are.
We're back on track. We're back on track.
Good.
Been talking, love?
Come see us at Regarding Men. Oh, God.
Where men are.
Men?
Rewind. Okay, I just have a great...
Turn it off, right? Just turn it off, Golden. God. Get me out of here. We'll see you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.